All the community here in Minneapolis and in the Twin Cities are really supporting this effort of peaceful protesting, and that's what the Native community's always been about.
I drove up to Minneapolis from my home in Nebraska to see and feel the impact of federal immigration enforcement efforts on the Native American community there.
My Anishinaabe name means Spirit Bird Woman. I'm Eagle Clan, and my family.
Indigenous peoples are heavily involved in efforts to resist the surge of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. They're visible at the massive public demonstrations and host their own vigils and rallies.
Also say no more. We want ICE off our streets. We want to bring.
Recent ones at the sites where Renee Good and Alex Preddy were killed by ICE officers. But first, the Native American community came together to support itself with community security patrols and donated supplies. And very quickly, that coming together became regional and then national, as support and donations started coming in from all directions. I stopped to buy Winnebago territory in Nebraska on my way up and found Keely Purcell getting ready to deliver supplies.
But the cool hats again, and then we had a donation of these really neat jackets from the
She said she felt
Army
compelled to
Navy
do the work and wasn't alone.
Everybody is just looking for how can we help? What can we do? And
at least one donor decided it was important to provide not just frontline protection, but also personal protection.
I went down and talked to one of the ladies that works in public health, and she said, "We don't need any more protest babies." I don't know if you want to put that on there.
Most of the donations make it up to the Powwow Grounds coffee house on Franklin Avenue in Minneapolis. It's become the center of the community effort and spirit.
Donations are coming from all over the country, even internationally. We got medical, water, everything. We're starting to direct food aid to people that are afraid to leave their homes.
Everybody's pulling together. They come in, they ask like if we need, what kind of supplies do we need, anything like that, and then they're going out and getting it. It's awesome seeing the whole community just come together like this.
There's a friendliness in the air, but there's no mistaking the seriousness of the day.
It's hard, it's hard to see, especially our children being scared to go to school. That shouldn't be, especially we're in 2026 now. Our kids shouldn't be experiencing this. It's heartbreaking.
The ICE activity known as Operation Metro Surge seems to be everywhere in the Twin Cities. When I was at the Powwow Grounds, I watched as 3 black SUVs, some with masked men inside, drove up to the building and people came out to meet them with whistles, war cries, and shouts of "ICE out." It was difficult to see, but it was also a moment that clearly demonstrated the commitment and courage of Native people in opposing immigration raids.
We are strong. We are strong.
And no matter what, when there's injustice to anybody in the world, as there are Native people around, we will be there.
That's right.
We were there for Black Lives Matter. We were there with George
We're used to protesting by ourselves and having a few white allies, but all the community here in Minneapolis and in the Twin Cities and people coming in from all over are really supporting this effort of peaceful protesting, and that's what the Native community's always been about.
Dakota land today, known as Minnesota. I'm Kevin Nabaresk for ICT.
Thousands of protesters gathered at the Arizona Capitol building January 30th to protest immigration and customs enforcement activity around the country. The protest comes amid a nationwide general strike against ICE, which called for protesters to call off work, school, and not to engage in any monetary transactions in show of solidarity. Restaurants and businesses in the Phoenix area closed their doors on Friday to show support for the protest.
I'm just increasing awareness about what's happening in our country right now. I'm really targeting the marginalized people and, just creating that awareness that we have a basic human right to live in peace with a feeling of safety and security. And what's happening today is just, it's crazy, it's unheard of, it's unprecedented in my lifetime. I'm 50 years old and I never thought anything like this would ever happen.
In January, federal authorities shot and killed Renee Good and Alex Preddy less than 3 weeks apart in Minneapolis, Minnesota. One attendee of the protest, who did not wish to be named for her safety, said the presence of ICE has changed the way she lives.
I have neighbors that have been terrorized by ICE. A few months ago, DHS did come to my neighbor's house, and that's what prompted me to start going to rapid response meetings and organizations, getting in touch with them so that I can be better prepared, because I myself was terrified when that happened. When ICE was in our communities directly, and I stayed in, I didn't leave. It was hard to go to work. It was hard to concentrate on school. So I had to put 2 months on hold in my life just to really prepare myself for what's happening with ICE.
Throughout the country, many tribal citizens have been arrested or detained, causing many tribal nations to issue statements to its citizens saying to carry their tribal identification cards. In early January, a Navajo man, Peter Yazzie, was unlawfully detained by ICE agents in Peoria, Arizona, despite providing his certificate of Indian blood, birth certificate, and tribal ID.
Everybody's scared, to be honest, and then people are getting their tribal IDs again. I know I just applied to get mine redone.
I carry my tribal ID. I have my my blood work and stuff, but I feel like that's not enough to protect me. And I really think that the government is they're not pretending anymore. This is how America always was. It's always been that way through my eyes. And now this time they're just not pretending.
For ICT, Daniel Herrera Carbajal.
A mistrial was declared on day 3 in Rapid City, South Dakota. NDN Collective founder and CEO Nick Tilsen was charged with aggravated assault against a law enforcement officer in 2022. ICT's Amelia Schaefer was in the courtroom and is here to tell us what happened. Welcome, Amelia.
Thank you for having me.
So, this has been going on for a long time, since 2022, and now we're finally in court. Tell us what happened.
Right, so this has been going on a long time. The actual incident happened roughly on June 11th, 2022. However, charges weren't pressed until June 30th, 2023, so over a year later. Now it's taken until 2026 for things to actually go to trial, which ended up after 3 days in court, resulting in a mistrial. The judge declared the mistrial around 8:30 Mountain Time on Wednesday after deliberating for nearly 6 hours. The jury was hung and unable to come to a conclusion. So this case has been going on for years and could continue. The state of South Dakota has roughly a month to decide whether they want to dismiss these charges or go back and retry the case.
It took a while for them to press charges. What exactly is Nick Tilsen charged with?
Tilsen is charged with aggravated assault against a law enforcement officer, or the jury, following an indictment on January 7th, was given the option of finding him guilty of simple assault against a law enforcement officer. He also was charged with a misdemeanor. Both those other charges are felonies, but he was charged with a misdemeanor of obstruction of law enforcement. So now, why is this? Of course, we know that Nick did not physically assault the officer. However, per South Dakota codified law, the argument isn't whether or not he assaulted the officer, it's if he performed his actions that night with the intent of striking fear into the officer. So a lot of the court and the arguments between prosecution and defense focused on what his intention was when he moved his truck towards Officer Glass that night. So what happened was, on that night, around 10 p.m., Officer Glass was speaking with a Native American man in downtown Rapid City. Tilsen, who was driving by, noticed the interaction and decided he would circle the block and come monitor the interaction. He said he did this because he feared the Native man was being harassed by law enforcement. So Tilsen comes up. He said he was unable to find a parking spot, but the officer is standing in a parking spot speaking to the man who's on the curb. Tilsen begins to come into the parking spot. The officer turns, sees him, turns back to speaking with the man. Tilsen said he took this lack of response or lack of putting his hand up to say don't come near or saying please go away as an indication he could continue to pull forward. Now, the exact incident in question is that he then takes his foot off the brake, puts it on the accelerator, and jolts forward. He ends up within roughly 2 feet to a yard of the officer. A yard's 3 feet. And so he did not hit the officer. He's not charged as doing so. He's charged with allegedly, or the state is saying, doing this to intimidate the officer and stop him from his ongoing investigation. So a lot of people in the community have been hung up on the specifics of, well, if he didn't touch him, why is he charged with assault? But that's not how the charge works per South Dakota codified law. You don't have to physically assault someone to be charged with assault.
We'll stay tuned and see what happens. Thanks, Amelia.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Nitsika tai gitsi. Nitsika tai gitsi means I feel the good in what you've done. Nitsika tai gitsi. Nitsika tai gitsi. I feel the good in what you've done.
So actually, at the opening ceremonies, President Bush came and sat with the Olympic figure skating team in our stands, which was really cool. And this is the jacket and the infamous hat that everybody wanted at that moment in time.
Naomi Lang was the first female Native American to compete in the Winter Olympics. She made history at the 2002 Salt Lake City Games in figure skating.
Representing the Indigenous community on a world stage, I think, was probably the coolest thing that happened to me at the Winter Olympics. Becoming the first female to participate in the Winter Olympics was quite an incredible feeling of accomplishment and pride, and showing that my hard work and my perseverance and working through all my struggles through life and sport hopefully set an example for other future athletes along the way to pursue their dreams as well. Even to this day, and it's been, over 10 years since the Olympics happened, I still feel that, excitement that I was able to do that. And, nowadays I'm able to share my story. I just finished an event at the Heard Museum in Arizona. I was able to share my story and connect with people and to be able to do those things and trailblaze and maybe give hope to the younger generation really means a lot to me. I just want to keep doing that, keep showing up for my culture. The biggest challenge, well, there's a lot of challenges that go along with getting to the Olympic rings. I just had this conversation that it is not a straight line in sport. You're this way, then you go this way, then you go this way. You might get injured. You might have a mental breakdown, but some way, somehow you make it to those Olympic rings. And it takes a strong mind. The hardest thing, I would say, was probably 9/11 when it happened, because I was living in New Jersey at the time, and we could actually see the smoke from the towers at that moment when everything happened. And that was right before the Olympics were going to happen, I think in 3 months. So we were very uncertain, and it was very mentally draining and heartbreaking that just something like that could happen to the world, as I'm going to cry. But it's the perseverance and the camaraderie of the country that brought everybody together, and it ended up being the most amazing event in our own homeland with our own, U.S. athletes felt so protected and loved at the same time.
It's Super Bowl time, and with the biggest game in American sports upon us, with the Seattle Seahawks scheduled to take on the New England Patriots on February 8th, we take a look at the spectacle through an Indigenous lens. We start with Seahawks defensive tackle Brandon Peely, Inupiat and Samoan descent, who will vie for a Super Bowl ring. While he plays sparingly, Peely has the opportunity to join Kansas City Chiefs James Winchester and Creed Humphrey as recent Indigenous athletes to hoist the Lombardi Trophy. And if the Super Bowl is the biggest game, the halftime show is America's biggest concert. Taking the stage this year is Bad Bunny, the Puerto Rican rapper, singer, and producer who has ancestral Taino roots. He often speaks proudly of the island's culture and occasionally incorporates Taino-inspired fashion and symbolism into his performances. Coming off a Grammy win for Album of the Year, Bad Bunny is sure to show out on the biggest stage. And then there's the second annual Indigenous Girls Celebrity Flag Football Game.
Get outside, man. Work on the field. Step.
29 Indigenous girls from 3 different states were set to participate in the exhibition game. The Native American Athletic Foundation has a partnership with the NFL, and were asked in part to help develop women's sports, specifically in flag football.
This is the concept that we have developed, and we've been working with these other organizations who are already doing it well, came out as partners, continuing to do these clinics, and then these girls have a great time. They get to go to the Super Bowl week. They get to participate in a number of different things, including media events and seeing what's going on behind the scenes during Super Bowl week. So it's an exciting time for them.
Another partner for this big event is the Los Angeles Chargers, who signed on to provide jerseys for the exhibition game.
So we have big names in big leagues that are participating and helping these girls get better at the sport, but at the same time show that they actually belong in the sport and they belong on the big stage. And so that is great, not just for the girls themselves, but for their little brothers and sisters, for their cousins, for their people back home. They see them on the big screen, and it gives the hope and it gives the inspiration for young people to say, yes, as an Indigenous person, as a young Native, I can participate at this level and thrive.
For ICT, I'm Colby Kicking Olin.
Here you can see how the contour lines are a little bit flatter. We made it to this turnaround, and that's where the canoe was. Lots of cool stuff you can find in the lake. Just gotta go look.
Tamara Thompson, maritime archaeologist for the Wisconsin Historical Society, went on a recreational dive to the bottom of Lake Mendota in 2021 to collect fisherman debris, and told a colleague she saw a long slope exposed through 24 feet of water.
You know, I really think that was a dugout canoe. I don't think that was just a random piece of wood on the bottom, but we should get another tank and we should go out, and I think I can find it again.
And she did.
But only the top portion was exposed. So the bottom was still covered with silt and it was just pristine. And it was so nice that I thought, well, it can't be old.
Thompson and a team of archaeologists pulled the canoe from the lake and through radiocarbon data analysis found it to be 1,200 years old. Or young. 2 more very, very ancient canoes were found a year later.
One ended up being 3,000 years old, which is recovered and in the tank. And then we found another one next to it, a little bit shorter, 2,000 years old.
Thompson says the canoes are at least 15 feet long and made of cottonwood, elm, and oak.
Red oak is very porous, and so they would have had to understand how to seal that cellular structure in the canoe when they were building it in order to make the vessel watertight.
A total of 16 canoes were found in Lake Mendota between 2022 and 2025. The oldest is 5,200 years old.
To put yourself in that place and think, what were these people like? What were they doing in these canoes? And then why are all these canoes in this one spot?
So at what point in this did you start reaching out to Wisconsin's Native nations?
Before any of the canoes were recovered, there was consultation with the Native Nations of Wisconsin.
Lawrence Polsinki, Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Bad River Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa, helped with the preservation process when the second canoe was pulled from the lake. He says his ancestors used inland waterways as transportation between one side of the lake to the other to harvest, hunt, and fish.
You couldn't carry much because they weren't like the total dugout type canoes, some were more level.
So what does that mean, the fact that they didn't carry and take them with them? They were left there.
The canoes were not owned by each individual or whatever. It was like a community.
There are no plans to move the remaining 14 canoes that are sitting here at the bottom of Lake Mendota, in a decision made collaboratively between Thompson and Wisconsin's Native nations, with the goal of responsible stewardship.
We're not in the business of bringing up the canoes. especially the shape that they were in. They were broke apart in your hand if you brought them up.
The 2 extracted canoes are sitting in a makeshift tank filled with polyethylene glycol at the State Preservation Facility in Madison to stabilize the fragile but heavy wood and then freeze dry them.
Any water that's left in the cellular structure will be taken off.
One canoe will be stored at the preservation facility, and the other will be on display at the upcoming Wisconsin History Center, where Pilskinski says their indigenous history can be preserved.
Let our knowledge be told, let our history be told of how we traveled.
From the homelands of Ho Chunk, I'm Erica Easy for ICT.
Tsapakasla. Tsapakasla. She's strong. Tsapakasla. Tsapakasla. She's strong. Tsapakasla. Tsapakasla. She's strong.
Sometimes words can't truly explain what is happening and what we're seeing, but sometimes art can speak to that and reflect that.
Across Turtle Island, Indigenous artists like Jerica Fountain are using their art as a way to spread awareness about what's going on in Minneapolis.
I like to co-op mini labels, logos, cartoons, and kind of take my spin on it as a Native American person, indigenize it. I had created the indigenized version of the SALT logo, and then eventually it kind of came to me about using how much we use salt here in Minnesota, because we're basically in the Arctic, how much salt we use to handle our ice situation.
Fountain's pieces have been used at protests across the Twin Cities area.
I feel like art has the ability to have anyone that views it reflect. I feel like it has the power to speak to everyone, and it doesn't matter how much knowledge you have about the subject. A lot of times people can learn so much and get so much and feel so much just from an art piece. In Minnesota right now, what you can see is everyone is taking what they're good at, what their gifts are, what they have, and contributing to the community. It's not just one organization, one nonprofit, one ethnic group coming together. It's the entire community coming together to figure out what they can contribute. Like, there are some people who are chefs and they're cooking and donating meals. And just me as an artist, I'm just taking what I have the ability to do and contributing. I feel like everyone here is doing that.
Over 146 miles northeast of the Twin Cities, Lakota tribal member Arias Benton Benet is using her talents as a seamstress to make a bold political statement.
Sa buju and dinoi magana dog hello all of my relatives. Jingo gijigu kwendijina kazawasa si and dudame, odawa zagai gunning and dunjaba. I wanted to make a statement, of support to all of our people, really, that are being taken from us.
Benton Benet, the owner of popular jingle dress design company House of Jingle Dresses, donned a new red ribbon dress on January 16th to speak about what's going on in Minnesota.
No one is illegal on stolen land means we can't criminalize people for wanting to, migrate to a safer, better place for their life. And I didn't really have a plan for it. I just knew that I wanted to create something, and it ended up just being the red, white, and blue colors. And I think there's symbolism in that. It was only in the last year or so that I realized that I can have a greater impact and a more meaningful impact with my creations. I started out by telling some of our oral traditions and history with some of my dresses. And now it's turned into preserving our history and sharing our truths as Ojibwe and Anishinaabe people. And acts of resistance can be many things. It can be singing, it can be dancing, it can be creating like I am.
A good DJ makes all the difference at a fashion show. DJ AO, Austin Owen, sets the beat.
My music, I have
tens of thousands of songs. So I mean, all that varies from country to R&B and obviously hip hop, classic rock. So my music spans in varieties, and I like to use the word chameleon because you can put me anywhere and I'll adapt. And that's what makes a good DJ, is being able to read your crowd and who you're playing music for. You had Rebecca Jarvie, who mentioned working for N7 or Reebok, one of them, still high profile designers or corporate, So it's great to see our people reaching those heights and starting to break through those brand names and creating that brand name themselves, whether through collaboration or their own work that they're being featured is awesome. That we're finally getting that renaissance of that our work is not just seen in our local communities or small, art districts, that we're starting to gain that some national recognition. I got a huge love for hip hop music, and when I think about, at least at the time when I thought about hip hop music and production, I would look at the rappers and I would always see behind them the DJ. So in my young mind at that time, I thought all the music came from the DJ, or that's all that production was needed in order to create music. Now, obviously, once I became one, there was a harsh reality, but still, there was an art form and a craft that was created by hip hop and using break beats and samples to reinnovate, classics and oldies and add a twist on it with the hip hop style. So that's what got me into DJing.